She had just given birth, and her body was still shaking from the shock. For a minute, she couldn't recognize who was in the room or who was talking to her. Her husband kept telling her to check the baby, which made her worry. Was there something wrong with the newborn? His face was stern and anxious. Something was clearly troubling him. Lauren Kirkin had never felt more excited and nervous in her life. She was pregnant with her first child, and every day felt like an eternity as she eagerly anticipated the arrival of their little bundle of joy. Her husband, 37-year-old Tommy, a freelance financial consultant, shared in her excitement, and together they planned and prepared meticulously for the upcoming arrival. Their small home in Yellowbridge, New Jersey, had turned into a baby haven. 33-year-old Lauren, a fifth-grade teacher, stood in front of the mirror, gently caressing her growing belly with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She was pregnant with her first child, and every flutter and kick filled her with indescribable joy. Beside her, Tommy beamed with pride, his hand resting protectively over hers. "We're going to be amazing parents," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. They had been waiting for this moment for what felt like an eternity, and now that it was finally here, they wanted to plan everything perfectly, from nursery decor to baby names. They were a team, eager to embrace parenthood together. Despite Tommy's curiosity, Lauren had decided early on that she didn't want to know the sex of the baby. At each prenatal scan, she averted her eyes when the technician hovered over the area that could reveal the baby's gender, preferring to keep it a mystery. Lauren's heart fluttered with anticipation as she cradled her burgeoning belly. The delicate kicks and flutters within were like sweet whispers of the life growing inside her. She and her husband, Tommy, were over the moon with excitement, eagerly awaiting the arrival of their first child. They wanted everything to be perfect. Despite Tommy's curiosity, Lauren was adamant about keeping the baby's sex a surprise. She reveled in the mystery, feeling a deep intuition that they were expecting a girl. But Tommy, ever the eager father-to-be, couldn't resist the temptation to know. Secretly, he visited the doctor, hoping to unravel the mystery. But the doctor was under strict instructions not to divulge the sex until birth. Lauren had no idea. As the days passed, Lauren busied herself with nesting, filling their home with warmth and love in preparation for their new addition. She indulged in pink hues and frilly decorations, convinced they were welcoming a baby girl. But as her due date drew nearer, a feeling settled in the pit of her stomach, a mother's intuition perhaps, that whispered the secret she longed to know. Deep down, she was convinced she was carrying a baby girl. Lauren's intuition whispered to her that they were having a girl. She felt it in every flutter, every dream she had about their baby. One day, when Lauren was busy preparing for their upcoming baby shower, Tommy vanished without explanation. She didn't think much of it at first, assuming he had errands to run or needed time to himself. Tommy had a secret mission of his own. He had wrestled with the decision to find out the baby's sex without Lauren. But curiosity ultimately won out. As the doctor revealed the long-awaited secret, Tommy's jaw dropped in disbelief. It was not what he had expected, but the news filled him with an overwhelming sense of happiness. Tommy returned home, unable to contain his excitement, and resumed helping Lauren prepare for their little one's arrival. It took everything in him to keep his mouth shut. Meanwhile, Lauren hummed tunes to the baby, carefully arranging tiny onesies and flowers for the shower. But as the hours passed and Tommy remained absent, a flicker of concern gnawed at her. Where had he gone? He knew she couldn't walk up the stairs without him. When he finally returned home, Tommy was greeted with a flurry of questions from Lauren. "It took me a whole extra 20 minutes to get up the stairs," she complained, but he deflected her inquiries with a nervous laugh, claiming he had lost track of time while running errands. Yet, his mind raced with the weight of the secret he now bore alone. That night, as they lay in bed, Tommy struggled to find sleep, his thoughts consumed by the knowledge he held. How could he keep such a monumental secret from Lauren? The weight of his silence pressed heavily on his chest, leaving him torn between the joy of knowing and the guilt of keeping it from her. As the moon cast its soft glow through the window, Tommy vowed to find a way to navigate the delicate balance between his desire to share the news and his promise to respect her wishes. But then, something terrible happened. Tommy lay beside his wife as she read through a parenting book, a slight smile on her face, clearly excited for what was to come. Lauren had been waiting to become a mother for so long. But, beside her, Tommy was anything but happy. His face was twisted in concern, regretful of his decision to learn the baby's sex without her. He felt like a terrible husband. Before they knew it, Lauren was in her final few days of pregnancy, ensuring she was ready to become a mother. But recently, something felt off. Her gut told her something was wrong, and she couldn't explain it. Tommy had been distant and quiet for days, and she didn't understand why. That day started like any other. Lauren awoke at 7 a.m. and took a long, cool shower. But when she came out, Tommy was nowhere to be seen, which was strange. Usually, he was still in bed. Lauren didn't think much of it at first. She dried her hair, got dressed, and headed downstairs, expecting to find Tommy in the kitchen. But the house was eerily quiet. "Honey!" she called out. No response. As she walked toward the front door, a familiar knot of unease tightened in her chest. The strange feeling that had been gnawing at her for days resurfaced. That's when she noticed it. A small piece of folded paper on the table near the key rack. Her heart sank. That wasn't there the night before. She picked up the note. It was Tommy's handwriting. She frowned as she read what it said. "I need some time to myself. I'm going out. Call me if you need anything. Love you." The message was simple, but it only heightened Lauren's concern. Tommy had been acting strange for a while now, distant and distracted, and this note felt like the tipping point. Was he dreading the birth of their child? Did he regret starting a family? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she decided not to call him. Maybe he truly needed some space. But just as Lauren sighed and set the note down, a sudden, sharp pain shot through her abdomen, making her wince. It was a strange, stinging sensation she had never felt before, but as quickly as it had come, it disappeared. She brushed it off, thinking it might be some sort of cramp. After all, she was 9 months pregnant. Aches and pains were common at this stage. The day continued as normal, but Lauren couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Tommy was still absent, and as the hours ticked by, her worry grew. It was now past 6 p.m., and he still hadn't returned. She sat on the couch, chewing her nails, staring blankly at the TV, waiting to hear his keys in the door. But the house remained silent. Then it hit her again, this time with an intensity she couldn't ignore. A deep, throbbing pain surged through her lower abdomen, leaving her breathless. She doubled over, gasping, her hand instinctively clutching her belly. This wasn't a normal cramp. This was something else. Fear gripped her. Was something happening to the baby? She was all alone, and she knew she had to do something. Summoning every ounce of strength, she crawled across the floor, barely able to stand, and reached for the phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed for an ambulance. The paramedics arrived quickly, finding Lauren curled up on the living room floor, clutching her belly and sobbing in fear. They strapped her to various machines, asking rapid-fire questions she could barely process through her haze of pain and panic. "Where's your husband?" one of the paramedics asked. I don't know," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. "He's not here." Meanwhile, across town, Tommy was having a heart-to-heart with his brother-in-law. They had been talking about the baby's gender and what he had done, how he had gone behind Lauren's back to learn the secret. Tommy had felt guilty for weeks, barely able to look his wife in the eyes. Just as he was about to leave, his phone rang. It was the hospital. Tommy's heart plummeted into his stomach as the voice on the other end relayed the news. Without a second thought, he rushed to his car and sped toward the hospital, panic rising in his chest. When Tommy arrived, his worst fears were realized. Lauren was in a private room, her face streaked with tears, her hands shaking. He burst through the door, his heart pounding with fear. "Honey, are you okay?" he asked, rushing to her side. He knelt beside her, clutching her hand tightly. Lauren sobbed into his chest, relieved he was there, but terrified for their baby. "The nurse said the doctor will be in to speak to me soon," she whispered through her tears. Just as she spoke those words, the doctor walked in, holding her medical file. He smiled gently, trying to ease the tension in the room. "Lauren, have you ever heard of Braxton Hicks contractions?" the doctor asked softly. "They're false labor pains. It's your body's way of preparing for the real thing. You and your baby are perfectly fine, but I suggest you get some rest. The real labor will be coming soon." Lauren let out a shaky breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Relief washed over her as she clung to Tommy's hand. They weren't losing the baby. Everything was okay. That night, as they lay in bed, Tommy held her close, his arms wrapped protectively around her. For the first time in weeks, he seemed more at ease, more affectionate. His distance had melted away, and Lauren felt a wave of gratitude for his presence. She didn't even think about the note he had left earlier. But just a few days later, the thrill of anticipation surged through her, quickly turning into urgency as they rushed to the hospital, the pain of contractions rippling through her body. Tommy remained by her side, holding her hand tightly, his eyes filled with concern as Lauren grimaced and gasped through each wave of pain. "It hurts," she whispered through clenched teeth. "I know, babe. You're doing great," Tommy murmured, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "Just hang in there. Our baby is almost here." Hours passed in a blur of pain and anticipation until finally, with one last push, their baby entered the world. The room filled with the sound of their newborn's first cries. Tears of joy streamed down Lauren's face as she reached for their baby. The nurses wrapped the tiny bundle in a receiving blanket and handed the baby to her. Tommy stood beside her, his eyes shining with happiness. "Unwrap the baby," he encouraged, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Exhausted but curious, Lauren reached out and began peeling back the layers of blankets. But as she did, confusion flickered across her face. Beneath the blanket was another, a soft, white jumper with a cryptic message embroidered on it. "Do I look like a boy?" Lauren's breath caught in her throat. She looked up at Tommy, her heart racing as the realization dawned on her. Tommy had known all along. They weren't having a girl, they were having a boy. Tears welled up in her eyes, a flood of emotions washing over her. "Tommy, you knew?" she whispered, her voice trembling with shock. Before Tommy could respond, the door burst open, and their family flooded into the room, laughing and cheering. Tommy had orchestrated the entire surprise, their excitement filling the room. Tears streamed down Lauren's face, a whirlwind of emotions crashing over her. She turned to Tommy, her eyes wide as she held their baby boy in her arms. "You knew?" she asked, still in shock. Tommy grinned sheepishly, nodding. "I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. I had to know. I wanted it to be perfect for you." He leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I planned this whole surprise, hoping it would be a moment we'd never forget." Lauren stared at him, a mix of disbelief and love swirling in her heart. "You sneaky, sneaky man," she whispered, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "But how could you keep that from me?" Tommy chuckled softly. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I knew how much you wanted the surprise. So, I waited. I figured if I was going to spill the beans, I might as well make it memorable." Lauren laughed through her tears, shaking her head. "I don't know whether to be mad at you or love you even more right now." "Hopefully the latter," Tommy teased, his eyes soft and full of affection. He gently touched the tiny hand of their son, who wriggled in his swaddle. "Looks like we'll have to redecorate that pink nursery." Lauren smiled through her tears, looking down at their baby boy. "I guess so," she whispered, brushing her thumb over his soft cheek. "But it doesn't matter. He's perfect. Everything is perfect." The room was alive with the sounds of joy as their family gathered around, taking turns to hold the newest member of the family. The tension, the worry, and the uncertainty that had plagued the past few weeks melted away, replaced by laughter and love. As the celebrations wound down and the visitors left, Lauren found herself alone with Tommy and their baby, the room quiet and peaceful. She leaned back against the pillows, cradling her son in her arms. Tommy sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her knee. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his eyes searching hers. Lauren looked at him and smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I'm more than okay," she whispered. "I'm happy. Really, truly happy." They sat together in silence for a moment, just soaking in the magnitude of the moment. Lauren gazed down at their son, her heart swelling with love. "What should we name him?" she asked. Tommy smiled. "I've been thinking about that. What about Ethan?" Lauren tilted her head, considering the name. It was strong, simple, and beautiful. "Ethan," she repeated softly. "It's perfect." Tommy leaned in, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, his hand gently caressing their son's tiny hand. "Welcome to the world, Ethan," he whispered. As they held their newborn son, the weight of the journey they had taken to get to this point settled over them. They had faced surprises, moments of doubt, and secrets. But in the end, they were exactly where they were meant to be. Lauren leaned her head against Tommy's shoulder, sighing contentedly. "You know," she murmured, "I thought I wanted a girl, but now, I wouldn't change a thing." Tommy smiled, wrapping his arm around her, holding his family close. "Me neither," he said softly. And as they sat there, gazing down at their perfect baby boy, they knew that their lives had just begun in the most beautiful, unexpected way.